Hey everybody, Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com, back to do another Monday live stream. Appreciate everybody stopping by. I wanted to talk about do a little stream a little differently today. We did, man, you guys were fast here today. Usually it takes a couple of minutes for the chat to fill up, so I appreciate everybody stopping. If you have a question, as usual, if you're new to the stream, feel free to ask it in the comments below. We're not going to watch tape again this week because you guys seemed to be okay with it last time, so I figured today we'll just kind of click around with some of the news of the day, some of the stuff I'd rather not talk about, but some of the stuff certainly catching the intrigue of Steelers Nation. So thank you guys so much for being here. I really appreciate it. We'll do the stream for about an hour till about 8 p.m. Eastern Time again. We do the stream every Monday at 7 p.m. Run that for about an hour. Thank you, PBS Nelzer, Kaylin Clark, Samantha Eckhorn, Mr. Card S2, and Noxley. Hey, glad you make it, Noxley. Now you've been trying to make it for the last couple. Thank you to everybody who is joining the stream again. If you have a question, feel free to leave it below. Subscribe to the channel if you would like. We're going to keep doing videos and tape breakdowns. If there's a particular tape breakdown you'd like me to do in terms of an edited video, not a live stream, I'd be more than happy to do it. I kind of don't have a lot of ideas right now anyway, with it being the off season. So if anything that you would like me to cover, feel free to suggest it, and I will try to do so. I have an article today, as you can tell, and I'm really loath to talk about this stuff because we feel like we're in just clickbait overdrive, especially when it comes to Pittsburgh, and you got the Myles Garrett stuff, and there's been so much just takes lately, but this might be the worst of the worst. And Thomas Davis, who's the Chargers linebacker, guy that Mike Tomlin's talked about and respected, been in the league for a long time, 3 torn ACLs. I mean, a guy that, until these comments at least, I had a lot of respect for. That respect's kind of shaken by what Todd Davis said yesterday, and accusing Ben of giving up on the Steelers. Here's the actual quote that he had. He was on, I don't even know what show he was on, NFL Network, it looks like, yesterday. And I'll read it off. You can obviously read it, though. He says, quote, Davis does, I look at the injury, and from my perspective, as a player who has played this game for a while and has gone through a ton of injuries, if there's something that I can possibly play with, I'm going to try to do it. I know the quarterback, your elbow, that's a little different, but we kind of heard that Ben could come back and play. Now, I want to stop that here because there's a lot going on. Okay. Davis has come back. He's been injured before. He's missed seasons with 3 torn ACLs. So he understands the severity of what a season-ending injury is. He's dealt with it 3 times. Then he says, quarterback's a little different. Your elbow. Again, you should be stopping yourself here, Davis, going, okay, I understand that that's defeating my own argument. And then he says, we kind of heard that Ben could come back and play. That's just not true. I don't know if that's something he is remembering incorrectly, or if there was some random unsourced report that said that. I'm not aware of that, or if he's just lying, but there was nothing that said Ben could come back and play. He was pretty quickly found out that he was going to be out for the season. I think that following day, I believe, mid-morning, around noon, 11 a.m., it was said that Ben's going to have to go undergo surgery and miss the rest of the year. So at no point did we ever really consider that Ben could come back and play right after the news, less than 24 hours after the injury against Seattle happened, that we knew he was done for the year, and there really was no path for him to come back and play. So this is just not accurate in the least. It's dangerous to talk about, spreading disinformation, hurting Ben's reputation. Not that I think it's actually going to hurt Ben's reputation, but wow, what a silly take from Thomas Davis. And he says about Steelers defense and playing well. If Ben could have come back, he would have come back. There was no way to do that. It just wasn't going to happen. So he's not even throwing right. He can't throw right now. He still has not been cleared to throw. And Thomas Davis thinks that Ben could have come back and played at the end of the regular season and at the end of December 2 months ago. No. So that's just insane. But anyway, I wanted to at least address that because it was kind of news of the day. I hate this takey stuff. I hate even amplifying it all the more. I prefer not to talk about this stuff, to be honest with you, but it was big news of the day. Samantha says, Mike T gave it up on first take today. Yeah, we can go to that next. He did. I don't know how much it's going to change, though, to be honest. I think everyone's opinion is their opinion, and I don't think you're really changing hearts and minds at this point. And I just hate that we're talking about it again, because this thing's been rehashed, 3 months after it happened with no new information. It's ESPN creating their own news cycle, creating their own echo chamber of, okay, let's interview Myles Garrett, re-bring this story up again, despite no new information. And so my thoughts are the same as they were after the accusation first happened, as Garrett was trying to appeal at the end of that process about a week after, or less than a week after, the first Browns game. But you can read the quote here from Tomlin. Or I can read it too, but he says, quote, Tomlin does, the most recent one this past weekend, I took offense to it, to be quite honest with you. Again, this is the characterization of Garrett in the interview and Outside the Lines on ESPN. When it first transpired during the season, we don't have a lot of time to pause and fight battles of that nature. Goes on to say, but when these allegations returned this past weekend, I thought it was appropriate that Mason is properly defended. So Tomlin certainly sticking his neck out for Mason Rudolph, but that's why players love him, because he's going to fight for them, he's going to be honest with them, and certainly appreciate that. Do I think it's going to really change anyone's mind? If you think that Garrett's telling the truth, I don't think Mike Tomlin talking is going to really sway you. And I think if you think Mason Rudolph was telling the truth, I don't think Tomlin's going to really harden your opinion all the more, although it's certainly nice to see it. That's the camp that I'm in, personally. So yeah, that's the story of the day. Charles Resnick says, what do you think happens with Sean Davis? He'll be playing somewhere else in 2020. I would love to be able to try to bring him back to safety depth, but I don't think he's interested in doing that, and I think it'll probably be a little too costly to try to do that. So I think he knows the writing's on the wall once they traded for Minka, who's obviously the future of this team at free safety, and Davis is going to try to move on and create his own path with a different organization. Samantha says, I mostly wanted to hear what he had to say about AB, and he didn't disappoint. Yeah, that was the other thing. I can pull that article up. Pretty short and sweet on AB, but that's the way I prefer it. Shut this talk down pretty quickly. Tomlin was asked by Stephen A. Smith if this team had any interest in bringing AB back after his World Apology Tour. And Tomlin says, quote, I'll say this, once a Steeler, always a Steeler. We had great success over 9+ years with Antonio. We're always going to be interested in his growth and development as a man, and will be open to assisting him in that, but we have no current business interest at this time. So, long story short, no, they're not bringing AB back, and I am fine with that. And then I wrote about it here. I think, not only, maybe AB's apologized to Ben, a little bit with Tomlin, but, I mean, when you just walk away from Art Rooney, I remember Art Rooney was trying to meet with AB for like 2 weeks, and they finally had a meeting. You kind of see in the tweet here. But it was, by that point, it was too late. The relationship was fractured. The bridge was burnt to the ground. And so whenever you disrespect the owner, especially a Rooney like that, you have no chance of coming back. That bridge is incinerated and gone forever, no matter what type of amends you try to make. So AB's not going to be a Steeler again, and I'm okay with it. I prefer that. Mutated genome. When a player tears a knee ligament or separates a shoulder, the team says it. Why are they being so hush-hush about the specifics of Ben's injury? I mean, the Steelers generally play injury stuff close to the vest. If they don't have to report it, if it doesn't get out there, then they generally keep it pretty quiet. So I am surprised that we don't really know the exact nature of the injury. I know Tommy John's been suggested. I'm pretty sure that's been refuted. It's one of the few things we know about the injury situation, that it wasn't Tommy John. I guess it doesn't ultimately matter a whole lot. We just know it was a serious elbow injury. I forget it was a muscle or a tendon. There was some sort of insinuation that it was one of those two. But Steelers generally keep that medical stuff close to the vest. And honestly, I'm going to put my tinfoil hat on here for a second. I'm betting there are some local guys in the Pittsburgh media that know, or at least could find out what's going on with Ben. But I also think they're playing a game, and I'm speculating here, clearly, but I think they're playing the game of they don't want to be the one who kind of gets on Ben or the organization's bad side by leaking what the injury was, because every local media beat writer is trying to angle for that Roethlisberger retirement news when the time comes, 2-3 years from now, and no one wants to potentially, speaking of burn bridges, burning a bridge by reporting Ben's injury, which probably Ben would rather not be made known, and that hurt them when it comes time for trying to get that scoop that Ben's retired, which hopefully is not for 2-3 years. So that's kind of the game I think they're playing, but I'm just, again, very much speculating on that. But yeah, it is unusual to not know the exact nature of the injury, especially if you think a national writer would pick that up, a Schefter type who doesn't care about maybe Ben scoop stuff. Well, he probably doesn't care about it, but you get what I'm saying. But it's serious elbow injury regardless. Ben says coach seemed obviously irritated. He had to continue to react to the situation. Yeah, and I feel the same way. I mean, again, you bring up a new cycle. If there was new information, if there was some sort of audio recording, something that would change the landscape of this, that would exonerate one of the two, then sure, it's worth talking about again. But this is just bringing it up again for no reason. I don't even get why ESPN's trying to run this Myles Garrett redemption arc story. I mean, I'm not trying to say the guy has to be banned forever. I'm fine with the suspension being the rest of the year, 6 games, he can come back, cool. But let's not paint him as this big redemption arc. He just comes back and let's all move on with life. And so for ESPN to even take this approach is weird. And then obviously what Garrett's saying, sticking to a story, brings the whole thing up again, and there's really no need to, but I think that's the boredom of the offseason with no football to talk about, in ESPN trying to create their own story, which they have successfully done because it's led to us talking about it, getting Tomlin on First Take, and it's a boom for business. So do we know what happened between Rudolph and Garrett? No. I mean, obviously no one knows. If there was some sort of smoking gun, some sort of audio recording or something, we wouldn't be having this conversation. We would just know what the facts are and proceed accordingly. But all the evidence, or lack of evidence, points to Rudolph telling the truth, and all the circumstantial evidence points to Rudolph telling the truth. When you look at, this wasn't even known until 4 or 5 days after the fact when Garrett tried to use it for his appeals case. No player said something after the game. No coach said something after the game. There wasn't a report after the game until, again, Garrett's appeal process began. If something like that was said, it certainly would be important context, and the Browns players would love to stick up for Garrett and say, okay, this is why he did what he did to Rudolph, because Rudolph said this racial slur, and so that never happened. So there's that element of it. Again, there is no hard evidence from Garrett's side. He just made the claim, and that's all he's able to provide is just a claim. And then also, and I took a little flack for this on Twitter, but whenever Ogunjobi hit and knocked down Mason Rudolph, Rudolph looked back at him and swore at him, but did not call him a racial slur. So if he was hurling the N-word around a bunch of times at Myles Garrett, he probably would have done the same to Ogunjobi. Now, that alone is not 100% evidence, but you combine that with the rest of the evidence I just went through, and all the circumstantial clues we have point to Rudolph telling the truth. Now, ultimately, in terms of what I think happened, and again, no one knows, I think Garrett has convinced himself that Rudolph said this. So I don't think Garrett even knows that it's a lie. I think he's been able to rationalize it for why he hit him with his own helmet like that, and said, well, he's just trying to rationalize it and say this is why it happened, and trying to convince himself and justify it to himself, to the point where now he believes that. It's the old George Costanza, it's not a lie if you believe it. I think that's how that went. So I think that's what's going on in Garrett's mind, but ultimately we'll probably never know the 100% the truth unless Garrett or Rudolph or whatever say otherwise, agree with the other, but all the evidence points to Rudolph telling the truth. Yeah, Ross, I think that's why people like Tomlin, because he'll do these things for his players. Absolutely. Knoxley says, would love more breakdowns on Mason and Duck, maybe mechanics or footwork, things Canada can help them with in general. I do have a breakdown on Steelers Depot. I can pull it up. We did an article that kind of looked at it briefly, at least. Some of the things that they could do. Let me find it. Yeah, my initial film review on Canada after they hired him. Look at this article, Knoxley, from January 16th. That kind of talks about Canada's overall philosophy, and then kind of gets into the application to the quarterback situation, and a couple examples of Rudolph, and here's one, and Duck, with some poor mechanics, things that Canada can hopefully emphasize and improve upon. So I would check that article out. Again, it's January 16th, Film Room, how Matt Canada will impact the Steelers' offense. Yeah, Charles, Pounce is a good one, too. I think I've used that example before. We didn't know he was having 7 surgeries and had this massive staph infection. So, again, the Steelers generally play stuff close to the vest. HIPAA laws, I mean, they're not going to disclose information unless it really gets out, or they really have to confirm it for some reason. So if they don't have to tell you, generally, the Steelers at least do not. Ben asks, and again, you guys have Steelers questions, feel free to leave them below. If it isn't tight end at 49, what need would you fill there, or is it best available? Again, it goes back to the kind of the big 4 needs as where I project this team to be at today when the time comes. You're talking tight end, interior offensive line, nose tackle, and safety depth. And whoever's the best player that fills one of those 4 needs is essentially my approach. So that's the way I would take it. I'm not locked into a particular position or player. I think you just kind of have to wait and see, and we'll see what moves this team makes. So we're seeing teams around the league, Cleveland, Washington, start to do some of their cap casualties. Now those are new regimes, and so that's more common. Usually can happen pretty quicker as they start to clear house. But right now Ramon Foster's still a Pittsburgh Steeler, so we assume that he's going to be cut, but we don't know that. And if he isn't, then it's going to change the complexion of our draft outlook. Mark Barron's still a Steeler right now. We assume he's going to be cut. We don't know that. Chicolo, same thing. So we have a ways to go to really know. Some of the draft needs I'm working off of are based on some assumptions about the team. Bud Dupree, still slated to be a free agent. Will they franchise tag him? Probably. I think almost certainly, but we don't know that yet. So it's hard to really say for sure until we hit the start of the new year, at least maybe a week before, when we know this team's made its moves to prepare for free agency and the draft. But those are the 4 needs I've identified based on my assumptions about the team, and I think you just find the best player who fits one of those needs can make an immediate impact from there. Donald Tillman, if money didn't matter, who would you rather have at strong safety, Edwards or Davis? I assume that means Edmonds. That's a good question. I think Davis, just because, I don't know, that's a good question. I think I trust Davis in coverage a little bit more right now. I mean, he's obviously further into his career, so that's understandable. He's a little bit older than Terrell Edmonds, has played a little more football than him. They're fairly similar guys, really sparky athletes that are not great playmakers. That's tackling could use a little bit of work, but are pretty physical players. I think Davis was more comfortable moving around and putting in different spots, which his defense needs, so I would give the lean to Sean Davis. But again, Edmonds is a young player. There has been improvement, though gradual, and I don't want to put a cap on his ceiling quite yet, but I think I would lean Sean Davis. I know it's kind of easy to forget about him with Minka trade and him getting hurt with that torn labrum 3 weeks into last year, or 2 weeks into last year, whatever it was. But still had value. Just not as when you had a secondary of Davis and Edmonds, and neither guys are playmakers, then it's really problematic. But if you compare Davis with Fitz, then I'm liking that duo pretty good. PB Snell Sr., what are your feelings on JT Barrett? Oh, P. Snell, okay, yeah. When I first read it, when you first joined, I was just reading. I should probably think these things through. So I just saw PBS and went, okay, but I gotcha. P. Snell. I don't have a whole lot of feelings with JT Barrett. I know signed to a futures contract. It's a stretch to say he'll even be carried through camp. I think he's just a 4th quarterback right now because if Ben's not ready for OTAs and minicamp and you got a 4th guy and Barrett could be a rookie minicamp arm, so he's probably somebody that will make it through rookie minicamp but could get cut before or after OTAs, or maybe after rookie minicamp when they want to add somebody back on the 90s, some trout guy they want to sign. Barrett could get the heave-ho, so I would be surprised to see him make it to Latrobe, and even if he does, it's going to be a real uphill battle, so not really expecting a whole lot from JT Barrett. Don't think we'll really see him at all in a Steelers uniform, to be perfectly honest with you. Mutated Genome is Jacob Crotchery going to be the new receivers coach. That's where it appears to be going. Brian McClendon reportedly going back to South Carolina. I know there was a report from some small guy out of North Carolina or Carolina area that said Crotchery is going to be the guy, but that's what the tea leaves are saying. We don't know for sure. Hopefully the team will announce the move within the next 48 hours, but I would expect Jericho Crotchery to be the new wide receivers coach. Dragon Jay-Z, does Edmonds have like Taylor syndrome? Kinda, yeah. I mean, Taylor just had bad hands. He could find the football. I mean, I don't know if Edmonds' hands are bad. He just has trouble trying to find the football. So, kind of, sorta, I would say. With Edmonds, they're just not great playmakers. But Edmonds could get better. I don't want to say he can't get better, but you kind of find out pretty quickly if you're a playmaker or not. And Edmonds certainly so far has not been that type of guy. Ali Howard, Species 5618, thanks for being here. I know you're always here every single week, and you're very welcome, Ben. If you guys have any other questions, let me know in the comments, and I'll be more than happy to answer. And again, we do this stream every Monday around 7 p.m. Eastern Time for about an hour. Mutated Genome asks, did you break down any college tape of Paxton Lynch before the 2016 draft or any of his NFL tape? Your thoughts on him? I'm sure we did a report on Paxton Lynch. I can probably pull it up. I don't know if I did it. I remember Mike Hilton laying him out. I did a report on that. I don't think we did a report on Paxton Lynch. So I remember him being a big arm guy and, obviously going to Denver. So I don't have a whole lot of feelings or thoughts on Paxton Lynch other than he was the failed, first round pick of Denver, but just had a massive arm. And I think some of the reports were in practice. You saw some guys that would get wowed by that because it's, running the scout team or whatever, this guy just launching bombs down the field, and some players were surprised by that. And I think Tomlin had a quote that said, this guy was a former first-round pick. Don't be surprised by that. So we'll see. We'll go into camp next year, and I can give you a better evaluation from there. I think maybe going in a situation where there's really no pressure, like Pittsburgh, as opposed to being a first-round pick in Denver, might help, psychologically. But I don't have a great feel on Paxton Lynch, and he'll have to battle duck for that number 3 spot. Kevin Quiros? Hopefully I'm saying that correctly. It says, do you think Brady's finally done with the Patriots? My guess is he'll be with New England next year. So I think there's some doubt this year for the first time really ever. But my belief is Tom Brady will be a Patriot in 2020. DN Steeler 0391, better receiver, Justin Brown or Lee Mays? There is a question for you. I got to go Lee Mays. Got to go with my UTEP guy. Better special teams player, I think. Probably just was more productive. I don't know what the career stats are, but Justin Brown had like half a season of working the offense, and that was about it. So I got to go Lee Mays because I'm guessing even he had to have had more production than Justin Brown. I like Lee Mays. That was one of those names. That's a little blast from the past. Remember Lee Mays and Quincy Morgan, and remember Morgan had that touchdown catch against the Browns when the Steelers won like 41-0 in a Week 17 finale, I think it was. So good name there at the end. Logan DiLorenzo. Edmonds has obviously never played outfield in baseball. He's had trouble tracking the ball in the air, and that's his biggest problem. Yeah, I mean, the guy has trouble with the ball in the air. There's no question about that. So I don't think, yeah, maybe he probably didn't play baseball, but the last outfielder that Steelers drafted was Senquez Golson, and that didn't really work either, though, of course, for injury reasons, not necessarily for play reasons. Golson, 7 career practices with Pittsburgh. Didn't make it to a game, did not appear in one game. That might be an NFL record, a first. A top 2 round player who never appeared in an NFL game. Maybe the guy Seattle drafted, a year or two ago? Malik McDowell, I think is his name, who got in that ATV accident and never played. But it's very short list of first or second round picks that never appeared in a game, even preseason. Goals in 7 career practices. Feel for him. I mean, obviously not his fault, but that one was unfortunate. Ali Howard, question, does franchise salaries affect the cap differently? Don't understand why that's always the option for salary cap strapped teams. I'm not quite sure what you're asking. The salary cap is the same for every team. Every team is working off the same ceiling. Teams manage it better than others, of course, but it's not like other teams inherently have more cap space than others. There's rollover and stuff like that, but every team works under the same league-wide cap, if that's what you're asking. Cecil Clark, hey Alex, I hope not, but are the Steelers considering running back in the second round? You think? It's hard to know their mindset. I know obviously Rooney's talked about needing their run game to get better, but you can fix the run game in a lot of different facets, not just in terms of who the ball carrier is. We'll see based on pre-draft interest and who they bring in for visits. That'll kind of give us a sign and a clue and a hint of what they're going to do. My bet is they won't invest heavily because they still, obviously, Connor's a talented player who can't stay healthy, but still a talented player, and I think they like Benny Snell a whole lot. Plus, you got Gareth White and Jalen Samuels and all those guys returning at least, so you got a lot of names there. So if you were to do it, you'd rather do it early with a second or third round pick as opposed to a fourth or fifth rounder where you feel like you just have another guy in the rotation. You would want to make if you're drafting running back, you want to jump in with both feet and go into the deep end and not just dip your toe in the water with a fifth round pick or whatever that is just going to muddy the group all the more. So if you were going to do it, you would do it early with a top guy like a J.K. Dobbins, for example. But my guess and my feeling is they're not going to do that. And people will get mad at me and say, they have to draft a running back. They will draft a running back high. But hear me now, believe me later. That's kind of my approach. Is that I don't think they're going to invest heavily or really at all in the running back position. Let's see here. Colin Childress, did you have a Monday terrible podcast? I haven't seen it yet. Just wondering. No, we'll be back tomorrow. For now on, for the remainder of the off season, or at least for now, at least maybe around draft season, it'll change. But we're gonna do Tuesday and Friday. We're doing our 2-week schedule as the NFL season has slowed down for Pittsburgh. So we'll be back Tuesday tomorrow, and then be on Friday, and we'll keep the schedule for at least the next couple of weeks. Dave was away. He was back in Florida this past week, so that's why we haven't done a show in a little bit. We will be back with the Terrible Podcast tomorrow, bright and early. So a lot to talk about, recapping everything we haven't talked about in the last week. Ben asks, when can we expect cap cuts and such? That's a good question. I'm trying to think when they've happened before. With some key veteran guys like Morgan Burnett took a long time to get released last year, but you would expect them to treat someone like Ramon Foster much differently than they did Burnett. Trying to think when like William Gay was released. It's probably going to be a week or so before the start of free agency, so that's going to be mid-March. So maybe right around the start of the second week of March, I would guess, is when they're going to maybe start making some of their moves. But I don't quite know for sure what their approach is going to be. And plus, you saw guys like John Bostic get cut after the draft, so these things can remain fluid for a little while longer. Smith at Corin, who was your dream pick this year in the draft? I don't know if I have that man crush yet. I think we got to go through the combine process. I still got to watch a lot more. So I haven't identified that man crush like maybe I've had in past years. I'm sure I'll eventually settle on a name, but I just don't have that particular guy right now. A lot of guys I like. I don't know if there's one guy that sticks out above the rest, to be honest with you. I held out hope for Senquez too. Then in the last rep he ever had, and I literally watched it happen, but Golson was running down a punt. He was a left gunner. It was almost the end of the day of practice. I think they were close to their first game, and I watched him as the gunner get a free release, run down the left sideline, and then pulled up on that left hamstring that just went out. He got carted off, and never played in Pittsburgh again. I think a brief time in Oakland, and that was it. So running down a punt in a special team session in practice at training camp, his last rep ever as a Steeler. Very unfortunate. Do you think Connor has any trade value? I'm sure he does, but I don't think there's any appetite for the Steelers to deal him. And plus, he is a running back with an injury history heading in the final year of his contract, so his value would be not great. Maybe a 6th-round pick, 5th-round pick, and I don't think there's any desire for the team to trade him. Are playmakers born or made? I think instinctually it's something you kind of have or you don't. I mean, of course, anyone can get better in any area, and as you get more comfortable and get more reps, you can certainly make plays. Look at Troy's rookie year, struggled. Once he kind of figured things out and the game slowed down, he became a first ballot Hall of Famer. Just feels good to be able to say that with finality and say Troy Polamalu, a first ballot Hall of Famer. But you do generally find out pretty quickly if a guy is capable of it. Minka Fitzpatrick, for example. Everyone says Edmonds, he's a young guy, he's 22. Let's not write him off yet. And there's truth to that, and I think it's fair to point out. But Minka Fitzpatrick, a second-year guy who got moved around in Miami like crazy. He got traded to Pittsburgh mid-season. He's making all these kinds of plays. So, Joe Hayden as a rookie in Cleveland, 6 interceptions, most picks he's ever had in a single season. So, you kind of find out generally pretty quickly if playmakers are playmakers. And you haven't seen it with Edmonds. And while it may get a little bit better and there's a luck factor involved, he's never going to be Minka Fitzpatrick or any sort of dominant ball-hawking playmaker. You just kind of know that by now. He's played 2,000 snaps in his NFL career. Mike Hilton was Golson's undrafted teammate and college roommate. Yeah, thank God for Hilton. I guess it kind of cancels out the loss of Golson, the whiff on Golson, because you certainly have a hit in Mike Hilton, who, by the way, restricted free agent, should receive the 2nd-round tender. Same with Matt Fowler, which is good, but that does eat up cap space. That's about a little over $3 million each for both of those guys on one-year deals. You can't spread that cap money around at all. So, when you talk about fighting the cap, it's not just tagging Dupree. That's the big one, obviously, but you got to be able to tag or tender Hilton, Fowler, and Zach Banner. Banner's going to be the original round tender, which is a 4th-round compensation, so no one's going to come trying to steal him, but that's still going to cost you like $2.7 million. So add up Hilton, Fowler, and Banner, that's like $8 or $9 million right there just in cap space alone for a team that does not have much. So that's another reason why this team's up against it and why they're going to be very quiet in free agency. Do you think the Steelers are high on UG3? Yeah, I think they are. I think they were impressed by not only what he did during the regular season as a special teams guy that was playing well, but in camp, I think he had a really good camp in preseason, played his way onto the roster. He was not guaranteed to make the roster. I mean, he kind of got aided by Smith's injury, but his own play was stellar and certainly warranted being on the roster. So I'm high on UG3, and I think the team likes him too. Andrew Newman, what are your thoughts on the potential of AFC North quarterbacks? Jackson Mayfield, potentially Burrow. Could be a rough 5 years if we don't find replacement in the near future. Thanks for all that you do. Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, it's a really good AFC North. I mean, Jackson, MVP. I'm still a believer in Baker Mayfield. I know Cleveland's all over the place, but still going to be there for a long time. Burrow's right him in pen for Cincinnati. I think it's going to be a great quarterback. So, yeah, I mean, Pittsburgh better find their replacement because they got to find someone that's going to have to compete with those 3 names for the next 10 years. So, yeah, that is a very valid concern, Andrew, no doubt about it. But for now, I'll just cherish Ben and try to hope and pray he's around for as long as possible. Yes, Logan, the franchise tag is that last resort, but it's also going to help buy time to try to do a long-term deal, and Dupree will probably get the tag. I hope they take O-line or tight end at 49. Yeah, both are possible. The class isn't great at either spot, at least the interior offensive line or the tight end class, but there should be some names there. Offensive tackle is strong with the top. but that won't be in play for Pittsburgh because they're not picking anywhere near where some of the top tackles are coming off the board, but that's okay. If the Steelers cannot work out a contract early on, would they be better off putting the transition tag on Bud instead of the franchise tag? They can match with any offer with that. Correct, they could, but no. I mean, just franchise tag him with hopes to do a long-term deal. A transition tag is so flimsy. It's so rarely used. I know Pittsburgh's done it before with Jason Worlds and I think Max Starks and maybe even Jeff Reed got transition tagged once. But also another factor is if you transition tag him and you lose him, like even if you don't end up matching the offer from another team, you don't get a compensatory pick for that, so something to consider. If they're going to tag him, I think it's going to, because the transition tag might even be less than what he made on the franchise tag or the 5th-year option last year at $9.2 million. So it's really not worth it. I think you just go franchise tag or bust. How do you feel about Adam Troutman at 49? I like it. I support it. Question is, will the Steelers take a small school guy in the top 2 rounds? That has not happened since 2004. With Ben in the 1st round out of Miami, Ohio, and Ricardo Coakley in the 2nd round at Tusculum. So the history is not on Pittsburgh's side. Now, history's meant to be broken, and they're not going to be beholden to that. And Troutman had a really strong Senior Bowl weekend. That's critical, showing that he can play in that, against higher competition. But the history says the Steelers go Power 5 in the 1st and 2nd round every year since 2005. I mean, there's no exceptions to that. So it's hard for them to even think about going outside the Power 5 and staying at FBS, let alone going to what state in Division 2, FCS, I forget which one they are, but not FBS. That's a stretch. But we'll see. Mr. Balls, hey Alex, congrats on all your success. Crazy to see what you've been able to do. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Class of 11, high school, I'm guessing. I don't know exactly who you are. I apologize. I'm sure if you said you don't have to say your name, but thank you very much for whoever's commenting on that. Thank you. Dragon JZ, when scouting players, college players, they I'm sorry, let me repeat this. When scouting college players, you think are playmakers, what do you look for? That you think are playmakers, I think. Oh, okay. Yes, you did edit yourself. Okay, I'll read this one more time. When scouting college players that you think are playmakers, what do you look for? In terms of guys that are playmakers, you generally don't have to look for playmakers. They just show up because they're playmakers. They're guys that pop on tape. They're the guys where you're watching a different player on another team or different side of the ball or position or whatever, and someone else keeps popping up, and eventually you kind of sit there and go, okay, I got to look up who this guy is that's making every single play. So in terms of looking for playmakers, they're generally guys that pop to you because they're just all over the tape. That's why they're playmakers. So I don't know if that's exactly the answer you're looking for, but in terms of trying to find playmakers, if you have to look hard at a guy and try to determine if he's a playmaker, like he's not a playmaker. He'll tell you if he's a playmaker or not, and that's kind of the way it works. P. Snell, does Mike Hilton get signed? In your opinion, you just say okay. You just say yep. He'll get the tender. Now, will he get a long-term deal? He'll want it. Definitely, he wanted it last year. Now last year got paid $650,000. Like he was on the exclusive rights tender. You get paid peanuts for that. This year he's at least going to be making over $3 million on that 1-year tender, so he's going to be putting more money into his pocket, and so that sense it may, he may not be as upset about not getting that long-term deal. He will still want a long-term deal and deserves a long-term deal, but he won't be cheap. Look at Kenny Moore. Let's pull up Kenny Moore's contract for the Colts and kind of show you what we're talking about. I mean, Hilton may not get quite this much money, but he's a very similar comp compared to the Colts nickelback Kenny Moore, who got a 4-year extension that's worth $33 million, $9 million, a full guarantee at signing. You see the overall contract layout here, making near $6 million in 2020. Got a big roster bonus. Again, structure deals can be different, but overall, just say 4 years, $33 million. What is that? That's about, again, a little over $8 million per year. I mean, that's what Hilton's going to be asking for. You can agree with it or not, but that's what the market is setting for top slot, cornerbacks. And can the Steelers afford that right now? I mean, it depends on how you structure it. I'm not going to say they can't. You can massage the cap however you want, but it's a lot of money. So don't think Hilton's going to be taking a $4 or $5 million per year deal. He's not. That's the way the market's going. He'll be taking at least $6.5, $7 million per year. And so just understand that in the context of what he'll cost to be retained on a long-term deal. But he will get the restricted tender at the 2nd round level. It won't be 1st round, but it will not be the original tender either because he's an undrafted player. So the Steelers would only have the right of first refusal if another team came calling, which would be possible, and they won't want to risk that. So they will put the 2nd round tender on Mike Hilton. What do you think about Ben being the future from Pittsburgh Plays, and what do you think about Terrell Edmunds' poor play? I think he gets too much credit. Also, all right, a lot of questions here from Pittsburgh Plays. Let me go through this one by one. What do you think about Ben being the future? In the sense of what future? In terms of 2025, he won't be the future. But a lot of people saying, oh, will Ben return, and what will his injury status be? And I understand that because we're in uncharted territory, and we're in the brave new world of a 38-year-old quarterback coming off major elbow surgery. But I personally just excited to get back a franchise first ballot slam dunk Hall of Fame quarterback. Like, I'm thrilled by that with this defense and how good this team can be. So I understand the concern, but I'm usually the cynic, but I cannot wait to get Ben back. I mean, you saw what this team did with Duck and Mason and that terrible quarterback situation last year, and they were still 8-8 and still had a chance to make the playoffs heading into Week 17, even though things all fell apart. Like, I cannot wait to see what this team can do because of largely the same defense returning with a Hall of Fame quarterback. I'm thrilled about that. I'm geeked about that. Let's start the season today. Like, I'm excited. So, he's not the future in terms of 4 or 5 years from now in all likelihood, but I'm excited to have Ben back in 2020 and likely 2021. For Edmunds, poor play. Poor play is a stretch. He's not a liability. He's not Artie Burns. People compare him to Artie Burns. Always a bust. He's like Artie, Jarvis. No, he's not a bust. He's not a liability. I just wanted to make more big plays. Like, you got to make big plays as a safety, as a defense. This defense had 38 takeaways last year. Edmunds had zero of those. So I want him to be able to create splash. It's got to be true for anyone on defense, especially your starting safety. I don't think he gets too much credit because he gets a lot of criticism from fans. But poor play is a little bit of a stretch for me personally. And then Steven Nelson, I don't think he's that good. I think you're in a party of one there. Pittsburgh plays about Nelson. Nelson had a fantastic season. What do you see Sean Davis' market as a free agent will be? Would like him back on a cheap one-year deal, but I think he gets too much. Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I think he'll get too much. I don't know what his market's going to be coming off the injury. The safety market's been a little weird. I think Chuck Clark for the Ravens just got 3 years, $16 million. It's hard to see Davis really getting a whole lot less than that. So I think Davis can get around, let's say, $4 to $5 million per year, maybe 2-year deal, 3-year deal, kind of what Chuck Clark for the Ravens got. So that's kind of my guess, but it's hard to really get a good feel for what Davis's market value is. What's the chances of getting a handshake at training camp this year? If you're at camp, come up and say hello before practice or after practice. So, yeah, absolutely. I love talking with you guys during training camp, so feel free. Knoxville Steelers are fantastic at drafting wide receivers. What's one key trait they look for? That's a good question. Where is my what they look for article we do every single year as kind of a draft preview? See if I can pull it up here for you guys, if I can remember. I don't know if I can find it right now. I forget what it's called. But I'll have an article that kind of looks at some of the draft studies and history of the receivers they have drafted and kind of show some information on that. Do you think Samuels has performed well enough to remain on the roster for 2020? I think he'll be in a battle. Generally, this team keeps 3 running backs and a fullback. They went up to keeping 5 running backs last year, partly because Rosie was done for the year and they had an open spot. They did not have another fullback on the roster. But if they keep only 3 running backs and a fullback, you got Connor and Snell, they're locks. Nix is basically a lock. And then you got 1 running back spot between Kareth White and Trey Edmunds and Jalen Samuels. So, I think Samuels will still be inside looking out right now, but he's not locked in. And he struggled last year. I'm trying to figure out where Samuels wins best. Like, where does he really excel at? It's kind of hard to find that spot. So, there's definitely a concern about him trying to make the roster heading into 2020. So, that's a fair point. I'm talking like that free safety from Louisville a few years ago who had 14 interceptions in the last year. What separates someone like him from a Minka or Bush? Yeah, you're talking about Gerard Holloman. They just took a flyer kind of box score scouting on that one. I mean, with Holloman in particular, he had no physicality, no will to tackle. Like, he was just the most gun-shy player, and that was true in training camp. Like, the guy is just could not tackle, could not be physical. So that separates him from a Minka. That's a much more physical, in-your-face type player. So it just depends on a case-by-case basis. It's hard to kind of really paint that with a super broad brush and a big umbrella about what separates the Minka Fitzpatricks from the world from the Gerard Hollamans of the world. But if you're a safety, you better be able to tackle, be able to be physical, support the run, and make plays in the open field. Not only as a ball hawk, but also as a tackler. And that's what separated a guy like Fitzpatrick, who's a great tackler, underrated about how good of a tackler he is. His miss rate was like 10% this year. Sean Davis this past year in 2018 was 20%. So that was critical. So I think that's one aspect of it. Could you see a scenario that Hilton doesn't get a contract? They look for Cam Sutton to replace him. Are you talking a long-term deal? Potentially on a tender this year? No, Hilton will be back. He will get tendered. They will not let Hilton go in that sense. After this year, if he doesn't get a long-term deal, maybe, but we'll see what happens. Samantha, which one of the young receivers do you think has the ability to be a star? Sans Juju. I mean, I think they've all been impressive, but Deontay Johnson's a guy that certainly has that kind of big ceiling playmaking ability, and so really encouraged by his work as a rookie coming in, not supposed to play a lot. Moncrief, everything falls apart 2 weeks in. Johnson's got to be the guy with punt return duty when Switzer went down. So really impressed by what Deontay Johnson did. Do you think Terrell Edmonds will become a playmaker or remain just another guy? I mean, he'll never be a ball hawk or a super crazy playmaker in all likelihood. He could get better. We'll see. I mean, I'm not going to really guess on that. He's 22 and he will get better, but he's never going to be probably this amazing ball hawk the way that Minka or those guys are. It's just, like I said earlier, you kind of find out pretty quickly if you have it or you don't, and Edmonds, in all likelihood, does not. Will the Steelers rework some existing contracts to try to make more cap room? Yes, but the problem is, and I can pull up an article that Dave Bryan wrote, because we are heading into an uncapped year for the CBA, assuming a new CBA does not get done soon, which we'll see, but probably not, it's harder to be able to create more space in the restructure. Now, I'm not a big cap guy. I can't explain this the way that Dave can. I would point you in the direction of this article from early January, 30% rule to result in little, if any, Steelers offseason contract restructuring. Basically, they can restructure a little bit with Ben, like $3 million roughly with Ben. Steelers stand only to clear about $3.2 million in 2020 cap space by restructuring it the way they usually would in regards to Ben, and that's about it. So in past years, if it wasn't an uncapped year, if the CBA wasn't expiring, you could be able to create like $10 million in restructure space with Ben alone, and that would take care of a lot of problems. It's a lot harder this year with the CBA heading into an uncapped year in the 30% rule, which says you can't make more than 30% of what you did the previous year. So it's a lot more difficult. They likely will do it with Ben. They can do a long-term extension with Cam Hayward, which should clear about another $3 million in space. So that gets you about $6 million, a little over $6 million cap space created by doing those two things. But it is a lot more challenging this year as opposed to other years, assuming the CBA does not get done within the next month, which I'm guessing it won't. Question, do you have the number of big plays we gave up 2 years before Edmonds and Sean Davis got there? I think people forget we used to be very leaky. I don't have those particular numbers. I could pull them up at some point. I could go on Pro Football Reference, so I'm not quite sure. But yeah, the defense as a whole has done a better job of keeping a lid on things. Absolutely. They've been better tacklers, which is a critical part of it, and just better communicators and just more talented. So that's a fair point to make, Ali Howard. Jamie Komet, love your work, Alex. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Again, we do these streams every Monday, 7 p.m. Maybe we go back to game film, but you guys seem okay without the game film, right? Let me know what you think. It's kind of nice to be able to go on Depot and just kind of look at old articles and be able to poke around this way. So if you guys are happy with that, I'll be happy with that. Again, check out the site. Got a lot of profiles going up here. A lot of draft profiles. We have one on this UCLA tight end. I'll have one tomorrow on TCU defensive tackle Ross Blacklock. And I think we have another one on someone else tomorrow. I think Harrison Bryant, the tight end, actually, out of FAU, I think we'll have going up on Steelers Depot tomorrow from Thomas. So check those ones out. Article here from Dave about Terrell Edmonds on Terrell Austin. DN Steeler 0391. Why do you think former backs that produced in college like John Dwyer, John Clay, and Chris Rainey never panned out in Pittsburgh? Because it's the draft, and the draft is an art, not a science, and I'm sure you could go to any team and say, why did these productive players in college not work out in the NFL? The success rate, even for teams like Pittsburgh, are not super high for across the board, and those guys were late-round picks. What Dwyer was 5th, and Rainey was like 5th, I think, and Clay was an undrafted free agent, so, just they're later round picks, undrafted guys, so the hit rate for those guys aren't going to be super high. A lot of good backs in college, you only need, you got 100 good backs in college. In the NFL, you only need like 60 good backs. So it's hard to, the pool gets squeezed, I guess, so to speak. But it's just the way the draft works. Not every guy's going to work out, and that's true of any team, not just Pittsburgh. Ali Arobi, sup, Alex, man, people will say anything for hot take. Yeah, it is hot take season. I mean, it is hitting us early, it feels like. It's just been crazy with some of the stuff what Chris Canty said, and Thomas Davis we talked about earlier, and Gil Brandt. What did Gil Brandt say here? Gil Brandt suggests Steelers go after free agent Melvin Gordon. And Brandt even recognized his cap space issue. He says the Steelers currently projected to have less than $2 million cap space per over the cap. Might not be able to. No, it's not that they might not be able to afford Gordon. They cannot afford. It's just not possible. Not a thing. So I don't even understand why it's suggested in the first place. And again, I'd rather not amplify. I mean, Brandt's got a big pool, and we're not exactly breaking news here. But I'd rather not feed into the clickbait narrative here from Gil Brandt to. I mean, he seems to understand that the Steelers don't have space, but yet writes about it anyway. So it's just frustrating. I prefer to focus on football. It'd be grounded in reality. This article is not grounded in reality in terms of what Gil Brandt is saying. Could you see Edmonds being moved to middle linebacker like Barron did? Not anytime soon. Maybe some point down the road. But they want to continue to give Edmonds snaps his strong safety and be able to see how he grows and develops. Plus, there's just no safety depth either. Like, what if today you move Edmonds to inside linebacker? Who's your strong safety? Like in 2020, there's just no one there. So I know you're probably not saying to do it now, but that's why I'm not even entertaining the idea, because he's going to be your strong safety in 2020, and that's kind of where my focus is at. Ben asks, do you think Spitzer will be back as a kickball returner this coming season? It'll be a tough pass. I mean, as a punt returner, he's not going to take that spot away from Deontay Johnson. As a kick returner only, what kind of value do you really have at that point? He's not put up great numbers. Just trying to make the roster is going to be difficult, because you're going to have Juju and James, Deontay Johnson. They're almost certain to draft a receiver. That guy may not be guaranteed to make the roster, but I'm going to assume it. So there's 4. Then you got Holton and Deion Kane and Darbo, and what other guys am I forgetting right now? Anthony Johnson signed to a futures deal, which is an intriguing name when he came out of Buffalo. So just like, where does Switzer fit in all those pieces? And I don't see that path right now. He'll probably be in camp, and we'll see what happens. Maybe they sign Eli Rogers back, who's doing well in the XFL right now, and the fans are probably rightfully saying that they shouldn't have cut at the end of training camp last year. So maybe Eli Rogers circles back. Whatever other moves they make, maybe they do bring in a low-level free agent. I have a couple of names in free agency, real low-level receivers that I'll suggest in the coming weeks. So it's just really hard to kind of see that path for Switzer as being just a kick returner and not a particularly good one. Do you see Deion Kane or Darbo having roles next year? We'll see. They're going to go into camp and battle, and I think Kane's got a higher ceiling than what Darbo has. I know Darbo's got pedigree as a former, 3rd-round pick of the Seahawks coming out of Michigan, but I think I like Kane more. I think there's excitement for Kane that he came in and made a couple splash and impressive plays, just getting on that moving train and being a young guy with not a whole lot of NFL experience and changing systems and schemes and coaches. So credit to the coaching staff for getting him ready, but credit to Kane too for showing that natural talent. So I think there's a chance, but we'll go into camp next year and kind of see how he looks. How much points do you average next year with healthy Ben? I say 25. I don't have a number. More than 2019. That's a very low bar. But 25 sounds maybe a little on the low end. I'd like it to be around 27. Would kind of be ideal. I'm not married to a number right now. I haven't thought about a number too much, but somewhere in that, let's say 25 to 28 range would be, I think, more than acceptable. Soliver 6, thanks for being here. What's up, Alex? Per Marco Boli. Kevin Colbert wouldn't confirm nor deny that Ben had Tommy John surgery. Is that something to be concerned about? And Tommy John versus a tendon reattached, which is better? Quotation marks. I'm not surprised that Colbert didn't confirm it, because again, I don't think they have any interest in talking about the exact nature of Ben's injury. At this point, I guess it doesn't matter a whole lot. He's well on his way on the rehab situation, so I'm not concerned about that. I'm not surprised that Colbert didn't just openly tell someone what Ben's injury was. They haven't said it so far. Why say it now? And I don't know which is better. My guess is that the tendon reattached is quote-unquote better than full-blown UCL. Well, I don't know. Tommy John is a UCL tear, UCL ligament, torn. So they're kind of the same thing, I guess, but that's above my pay grade, to be honest, Solarverse. So I don't know exactly which is better. I'm guessing the tendon being reattached is better. But whatever he has to do to get healthy and ready to throw again for week 1 is all I care about, and he seems to be on the right track for that, so that's the important part. Thoughts on Gentry? It's really hard to say. The dude played 50 snaps on offense last year. We'll see progression from year 1 to year 2. That's pretty common for anybody, especially tight ends. It's a tough transition to make, probably the second toughest transition to make for any rookie, aside from quarterback. And he was a raw guy, obviously a quarterback early on to Michigan, and team knew he was pretty raw coming out. Left as a junior, so I don't have a whole lot of thoughts. I think he'll be a guy that certainly we'll have a lot of eyes on come Latrobe time in late July and early August, but there just was not a whole lot to go off of. But I would not count on him to be even a number 2 next year. Maybe just a solid number 3 is kind of the expectation. Do you think some of Switzer's performance issues are related to his surgery from the end of last year? It's hard to say. Guys always deal with injuries, and you never really know, and those things can be mitigating factors. But no, I mean, short answer, I don't think that I would blame poor health on Switzer's, pretty uninspiring play. Fournette struck me as it looks like Tarzan plays like Jane guy. Yeah, I mean, I do have to understand and respect that he got dealt mid-season. That's a tough transition. Coming from Seattle to Pittsburgh, it's a whole thing. Trying to learn the new system, new scheme. But yeah, I just was not impressed by Fournette last year. I would sign him only for a minimum deal. Anything more, I'd say see ya. Especially if you're going to bring back Vance, which it seems like they're more likely than not to pick up Vance's option, and he'll be a Steeler in 2020. How many games Connor plays this year? I mean, who can predict it? Who can predict injury history and stuff like that? Probably not all 16, but that's the only answer I can really give you. I hope it's all 16, but with his injury history, I mean, you just never know. So, really could not give you a good answer there, Cecil. Are you happy with how Villanova was play at left tackle? Will he be the weakest link in 2020? Should the Steelers be looking to upgrade? Yeah, I'm happy with it. Overall, I mean, obviously, the line as a whole and the run department did not do particularly good job. Villanova had particular struggles, but he's always been a guy that struggles early in the year. I think he gave up like 2 sacks within the first 4 weeks and then allowed like a half sack the rest of the way. So he's always someone that takes some time to kind of get settled in, knock the rust off. He's always got shoulder problems in training camp. You see him at camp, he's going to be walking around with ice on every day after the first week of training camp and get some days off and things like that. So I think you just come to expect that stuff with Villanova. But yeah, I think he had a better year than people kind of give him credit for, because he had a tough start, and people just kind of label that and plaster that for the rest of the season. But I think he had a pretty good year in pass pro last year. Will he be the weakest link in 2020? Let's just see what the O-line looks like. What happens with Foster? Let's assume he gets cut. Fowler gets moved to the left guard. What happens to right tackle between a core 4 and Banner? Who's going to look good there? Who's going to take control of that job potentially? I mean, I'm not even thinking about that yet. Let's just see what moves they make along the O-line. Let's come out of the draft, coming out of free agency, and then I can kind of give you a better lay of the land and who's projected to move and play and potentially battle where. Any insight into Cotchery's coaching style? He was so quiet in Pittsburgh. No, I have not looked into Cotchery too much in terms of his coaching style. Been an assistant with Carolina with the receivers since 2017. Probably not going to get a whole lot of information on that, but it is interesting. They're going in a different direction. They've always had the older, veteran father figures for the last decade, basically. Richard Mann, Daryl Drake, the late Daryl Drake, and then Ray Sherman as the interim wide receivers coach last year. So now they're going to go with a 30-something, I think, year old Cotchery, or maybe 40 years old, however old he is. He's probably like 37 years old. So it's a different style. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it's a different style, so that'll be interesting. But I think they're trying to get younger with the coaching staff, be more relatable. Guys like Eddie Faulkner, Matt Canada is a relatively young guy coming from the college game. I think that's kind of been the approach this team has had. And Cotchery's not coming from the college game, but as a young guy that can relate to that young receiver group pretty well. And a former Steeler, I think. Did he play with it? He didn't play with Juju. I don't think he's played with any of those guys, but can relate to them. Hope we see a lot of Benny Snell football this year. I think you will. I think they're very encouraged by Benny Snell's rookie performance, as am I. Zach says thoughts on Matt Canada. I think it's just good to get a position coach in general. If you're going to have that kind of heavy investment in Mason Rudolph and declare him the heir to Ben and your potential franchise guy and all that, it's a disservice to that investment to not have a dedicated quarterback coach. So pretty bright offensive mind. Obviously knows Pittsburgh area well, was the OC in Pitt in 2016. Probably has a good relationship with the team to some decent degree already. And I think it was a good hire. Ali Arobi, I think Banner has a high ceiling, but haven't seen any pass pro run block is great. Yeah, I mean, you just don't know. He's climbed the ladder since coming to Pittsburgh, being in a mid-camp ad that just kind of felt like an afterthought and makes the roster and battles it out this year, gets a spot, gets a hat, and plays well. But, that's the difference between being a 6 offensive lineman and being a full-time guy. So we'll see. But yeah, I mean, the dude's answered every challenge at Pittsburgh so far. They did draft a core four in the third round, and he had a down year last year, but I don't want to count out a core four either. Will we start hearing about players Steelers met with at the Combine? Yeah, usually players get interviewed by the media during the Combine, and reporters always ask who you met with, and someone always asks, I've met with Pittsburgh, so the Steelers will never say that, who they're meeting with, but usually players will end up naturally disclosing the information during the media interview process. So we always get an incomplete list. I mean, I think they changed the rules this year in terms of how many you guys you interview. I think it's like 45 now instead of 60, but we never even hit 45 names in the past. But we'll get like 20 names probably of players that they met with. But that is standard. They're meeting with a ton of these guys. It doesn't mean a whole lot. I think the pro day and the pre-draft visit stuff was a lot more important than the 15-minute combine interview. Your guy Julian Hauser is hanging around the CFL, isn't he? Yes, I believe he's with the Hamilton Tiger Cats. I believe, yeah, he's up. I don't really know how well he's doing. I don't follow CFL football too much. I follow Julian on Instagram a little bit and see some stuff, but I never really kept up with it. But he was with, who was he with? The Jets, I think. They converted him to fullback for a little bit, and he made a roster and played a little bit of football on Sundays, and that was fairly short-lived, but still really cool. And so he's with a CFL, and I believe he's with Hamilton. Cecil Clark, Kevin Colbert recently expressed his satisfaction with the backup quarterback situation in Pittsburgh. Should he be? I'm less satisfied than he is, but I understand and kind of agree with the assessment of let's see how Rudolph looks after this crazy year, what his growth and development can be. And the fact is they kind of have to be satisfied, or at least openly say they're satisfied, because drafting one's going to be tough with only 6 draft picks overall and so many needs to fill, and with no money in for agency, there's just really no one they could go get. So they kind of have to be satisfied and roll with this group, whether they like it or not. A couple more questions and we'll end the stream. Thanks everybody for being here. A pretty good, really good crowd today. So I thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Again, we are here every Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. If Hurts is there for our comp pick, you think we should take a chance on him. I'm personally not a fan. I like Jalen Hurts, but again, I have no interest in drafting a quarterback this year. Next year, maybe. Maybe next year. Not this year. I want to invest in building around Ben this year, especially with those early picks. So I like Jalen Hurts. Kind of reminds me of Deshaun Watson, a lesser Deshaun Watson, but don't want to draft a quarterback this year. Anyway, you're very welcome. Peace now. And Chad, thank you for being here, Chad. Shout out to the whole Steelers Depot crew, evaluators, and commenters. Thanks everybody to make this work. Yeah, teamwork makes the dream work. And so got a great group over on Steelers Depot. So be sure to follow all of them. And again, we'll be back next Monday. Hopefully I have a video in between. I don't know for sure if I'll have any sort of tape breakdown in between. It won't be a live stream. But again, every Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. We do the stream for about an hour, so thank you guys so much. I got one more question, then I'll get out of here. From Christopher Henderson, late to the party, and if you already talked about it, then I'll just rewatch. But did you check out Adam Troutman? Yeah, I did talk about him briefly earlier. I like him. Had a really good Senior Bowl week. One of the biggest money makers down in Mobile. Will the Steelers take a small school guy that high? Pick 49 is where he would have to be taken. That's very questionable. So I like his game. Proving himself at the Senior Bowl is really important, but I think that the idea of them taking a small school guy that high is at least going against history. Not impossible, but going against a lot of history. Jalen Hurts reminded me of Mason in the pocket. Not a good way against Clemson. I'd have to go back and look. I don't know if I get a real good Mason Rudolph feel. I know what you're probably saying. Not dealing with pressure well, but I don't think my overall comp to him would be Mason Rudolph. I think he's kind of like a Deshaun Watson type, especially with leadership too. Very good leader, and got to respect that for the quarterback position. All right, guys. Thank you guys so much for being here. Again, Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Every week we will do this stream. Lawrence Davis, you think we should have an all-offense draft? No, there's always going to be a balance. They're never all offense or all defense, so it'll be a mix. We'll just kind of see what it leans towards. Probably leans towards offense, but we'll see. All right, guys. Thank you, guys. I keep saying guys. Very much for being here. Again, back Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Subscribe to the channel if you would like, so you don't miss a video. And thank you for watching, and we'll talk to you soon.